Okay, so the first thing on your pretest, if you didn't change that minus to a plus, do that. Otherwise, that first question will not work, so make sure you change that. This is substitution, so now you're going to take this, x equals, and you're going to plug it in for the x in the other equation. So you now have 2 parentheses, 2y plus 1 plus 3y equals 16. So you've replaced that x with the 2y plus 1. So now that there's a 2 on the outside of the parentheses, you have to distribute. So you have 4y plus 2 plus 3y equals 16. So now you can combine like terms. So there's a 4y and a 3y. You combine like terms. 4y plus 3y makes 7y plus 2 equals 16. So now you're going to minus 2 from each side. So you have 7y equals 14. Divide it by 7 and y equals 2. Now the nice thing about substitution is you already have what x equals, which is 2y plus 1. So now you just replace that y with 2, and it'll give you what x equals. So 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5, so x equals 5. So you can write this as an ordered pair, 5, 2, so that means x equals 5 and y equals 2, or you can just circle those so that I can find them. Whatever way makes you happy, as long as I can find it on your paper. So don't hide them out somewhere, makes it hard for me to find. Okay, question number 2. So this one's a little bit more challenging. You're supposed to use substitution, but it's not set up to use substitution right off. So I'm going to solve for this y. The reason I'm going to solve for it is because these ones all have coefficients that aren't 1. Notice it has a 2, a 3, a 9, but this has a coefficient of 1. So the one that has a coefficient of 1 is the one I want to solve for. So to solve for that, I'm going to get this y alone, so I'm going to get rid of the minus 9x by adding 9x to each side. So I have negative y equals 9x minus 5. So now to get rid of the negative, I just multiply everything by a negative 1, so I distribute that. A negative times a negative is a positive. Negative times positive is negative. Negative times negative is positive. So if you look at it, really all that you do is you just change all of the signs. The negatives becomes positive, and the positive becomes negative. So now I know what y equals. I can take this information and plug it in for y on the second equation. So I have 3x minus 2 parentheses, negative 9x plus 5 equals negative 3. So now that we've got that, now I can just distribute that negative 2. And make sure you understand you're distributing a negative 2. So negative 2 times negative 9 is a positive 18x. Negative 2 times 5 is a negative 10. Still equals negative 3, and the 3x is still in front. So now I just combine like terms. 3x and 18x makes 21x. Minus 10 equals negative 3. So I need to get rid of that negative 10, so I add 10 to each side. So 21x equals 7. Divide it by 21, and x equals 1/3. The way I get that is I know 7 and 21 are each divisible by 7, so I divide them each by 7. So that's how I get x equals 1/3. So now that I've got x up here, I know that y equals negative 9 times 1/3 plus 5. So 1/3 of 9 is 3, and then it's got a negative, so that makes a negative 3. So y equals negative 3 plus 5, so y equals 2. So x is 1/3, y is 2. There's your ordered pair, or you can just circle those. So question number 3 is all set up for you to do. You're just going to take this y equals and plug it in for that y. So you have x squared minus 5x plus negative 2x minus 10 equals 8. So I have x squared minus 5x plus a negative is still a negative, plus another negative is still a negative. In other words, I can just drop the parentheses. So now that I've got that far, now I can combine like terms. X squared minus 7x minus 10 equals 8. So anytime you see an x with a variable, like an x that's squared or a variable that's squared, and then another one, and then another one, we say it's quadratic, okay? It has a squared, an x, and then a number. You want to get them equal to 0. So I'm going to minus the 8, and that'll make it equal to 0. So I have x squared minus 7x minus 18 equals 0. And the reason we want to do that is because now we can factor it. Okay, the little rectangle thing, x squared negative 18. So what multiplies to be negative 18 and combines to be negative 7? So 18, that's 1 and negative 18, 2 and negative 9, 3 and negative 6. Those are all my choices. But these two, if I combine them, make negative 7, which is what I need here. So this is negative 9x, this is 2x. So x times x is x squared, so I could put x times x minus 9 plus 2. So minus 9 plus 2. So those are my factors. And once you get the factors, all you need to do now is take each factor and put it equal to 0. So I took my two factors, x minus 9 and x plus 2. We put them equal to 0, and now I solve for x. So I add 9, so x equals 9 minus the 2, x equals negative 2. So x equals 9, x equals negative 2. Now I know that y equals negative 2x minus 10, so I'm going to replace that x with 9 on both of them. Well, on the first one. Then on the second one, I'm going to replace that x with negative 2. So negative 2 times 9 is negative 18, minus 10 is negative 28. So when x equals 9, y equals negative 28. And negative 2 times negative 2 is a positive 4, minus 10 is negative 6. So when x equals negative 2, y equals negative 6. So I can write that as an ordered pair. And that's my answer. So that's substitution. Okay. Now the next four questions say use elimination. A little bit easier. It won't take as long, especially if they're set up like number 4 is. Those are set up so that if I look at these, if I added these two equations together, the y's would disappear. So 1x plus 3x is 4x. The y's go away, and I get equals 16. So now I divide it by 4. X equals 4. So now I know that x plus y equals 11. So I'm going to replace this x with 4, kind of like what we did with substitution. Now I minus the 4, and y equals 7. So x equals 4, y equals 7. And you could do it that way as well. So now in the next one, so continuing on with the elimination, this again is set up nicely for us. If I add those together, the 5's disappear because one's positive, one's negative. So 2x plus 3x is 5x. Negative 5 and negative 10 make negative 15. So I divide it by 5, and x equals negative 3. So now I pick one of these. It doesn't matter which one you pick, but you're going to pick one of them. And you're going to replace the x with negative 3. So it's going to be 2 times negative 3 plus 5y equals negative 5. So that's negative 6 plus 5y equals negative 5. Add the 6 to it. 5y equals 1. Divide it by 5, and y equals 1/5. If you ever wonder if you're doing these right, you can actually take these answers and plug them back in to both equations, and you should get the answer at the end. So 3 times negative 3 is negative 9. 1/5 of 5 is negative 1. That gives us negative 10. Same thing up here. Negative 6 plus 1 makes negative 5. So you can check your work and find out if you've done them correct or not. All right, question number 6. Now this isn't set up as nice for elimination. So I have to decide, am I going to get rid of the x's, or am I going to get rid of the y's? The smallest number that the x, the 8, and the 6 would go into is 24, because multiples of 8 and multiples of 6. So 24 is the smallest number they have in common. So I'd have to multiply all this by 3 and all of the bottom by 4. Or I see that the y's, if I multiply all of this one by a negative 2, then that's a positive 2y on the top and a negative 2y on the bottom. So the top equation is just 8x plus 2y equals 18. The bottom one, after I multiply it by negative 2, is positive 12x minus 2y equals negative 28. Make sure I did the signs right. Negative times a negative, negative, negative. So those all match up. So now when I add these two equations together, 8 plus 12 makes 20. The y's go away, and negative 28 plus 18 is negative 10. So now I divide it by 20, and x equals negative 1/2. So x equals negative 1/2. I pick one of these two equations. I'm going to pick the one that's the bottom one. All right, so I'm going to replace this x with negative 1/2. So that x is negative 1/2. Half of 6 is 3, and a negative times a negative makes a positive. So now to get rid of the 3, I minus 3 from each side, so y equals 11. So x equals negative 1/2, y equals 11, or we could put it as an ordered pair. Circle your answer, make a box around it, whatever. Okay, number 7. It's a little bit more challenging, but it's set up nicely as well, so that if I add things together, notice these x, y's are going to disappear because one's positive, one's negative. Okay, so I add those together, those are gone. Now I have x squared minus 3x equals 10. So again, remember what I told you earlier, if you have a variable that's squared, another one that's just like to the 1 and then a number, that's quadratic. You want to make it equal to 0. So I minus the 10 over. So now I have x squared minus 3x minus 10 equals 0. So now that I've got to that point, now we're going to factor again. X squared negative 10, that makes negative 10x squared. So what multiplies to be negative 10 and adds to be negative 3? So the only things that multiply to be 10 are 1 and 10, and 2 and 5. So 2 minus 5 is negative 3, so that's the one I want. So I put x and 2 and x and negative 5. So those are my factors. X minus 5, x plus 2. And then we're going to put each factor equal to 0. So remember, once we get them factored, we put each factor equal to 0. Now I just solve each one of those. So I add the 5 over. So x equals 5 minus the 2 over. X equals negative 2. So now I've got to plug that back in for x. And I'm going to plug it into the bottom one. I could plug it in the top, but the bottom one looks smaller. So that's why I'm going to plug it into that one. So I plug 5 in for x. So negative 5 minus 5y equals 0. And then I plug negative 2 in. So negative 2 minus 2y equals 0. So I've plugged each of these 5. So this was when x equals 5. This was when x equals negative 2. So I plugged in a negative 2. So realize that turns into a plus. Here, let's rewrite that one again, just so that you can see what's happened. So there's a negative already. Then I plug in the negative 2 minus a negative 2. Y equals 0. Okay, so I really did plug in the negative 2. So now let's work with this first one. I want to get the 5y alone, so I add the 5 to each side. So negative 5y equals 5. Divide by negative 5 to get y alone because it's 5 times y. So the opposite of times is divide. So those go away. I'm left with 5 divided by negative 5 is negative 1. So when x equals 5, y equals negative 1. So that's 5 comma negative 1. Now on the next one, a negative and a negative makes a positive 2. A negative and negative makes a positive 2y equals 0. So I minus the 2 from each side. So 2y equals negative 2. Divide it by 2 and y equals negative 1. So when x is negative 2, y is negative 1. And those are your answers. So you could have written it like this as well. All right. So 3 more questions, and then I'll make another video with the other questions on there. So I'm going to start with graphing these. Remember, this is the b, which is where it crosses the y-axis. So I come down to negative 3, and I put a dot there. This is the m, which is the slope, so it's the rise over the run. So I go up 2 over 3, up 2 over 3, up 2 over 3. I could keep going this way forever and ever. Okay, so now I grab my straight edge and I connect the dots. So there we go. You can use a ruler, piece of paper, whatever you need to make that line look nice. So now This -6, that's my y-intercept, so I put a dot at -6. Then I'm going to go up 5 over 3, so up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3. Oh, there's where they intersect. That's really all that I'm after. But I can do this again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3. Grab my straight edge tool. So a lot of you leave your answer at this point, but that's not done, okay? You have to tell me what this intersection point is. So the x value is 3, the y value is -1. So x equals 3, y equals -1. Number 9. This one's not set up in y equals mx plus b, so I've got to add the 4x to each side. So now it says y equals 4x plus 11. So I'm going to come up here to 11. Normally I would go up 4 over 1. So where would I have to start to go up 4 over 1? So if I go from there, 1, 2, 3, 4, up 4 over 1. So I can do this same pattern, up 4 over 1, up 4 over 1. Okay, now I can connect my dots. Whoops, I want yellow. So there's that line. Now the other one, I need to get y alone, so I'm going to add 5x. And add 16. And what I do to one side, I do to the other. So now I have 2y, these go away, those go away, equals 5x plus 16. So now I divide it by 2. Y equals 5 halves x plus 8. So I come to 8. I'm going to go up 5, and I'm off the screen over 2. So instead, I'm going to go down 5 and 2. Down 5 and 2. Down 5 and 2. Grab my line maker. Connect those dots. So the intersection is what we're after. So when we're solving a system of equations, what we're really saying is what values of x and y make each statement true. So that intersection point is -2, 3. So x equals -2, y equals 3 is my answer. Just to show you how this would work on your calculator, if I go to this graph, y equals 4x plus 11, I'm going to put that into equation 1. So 4x plus 11. Then I'm going to type in my other equation. So again, you have to solve them for y before you can put it in your calculator. 5 halves x plus 8. So 5 halves x plus 8. Now, you can look at your graph, and it's going to bring them up. But what I really want you guys to get familiar with and doing well is being able to plot these nicely on your paper. So if you go to second graph, it brings up a table. Okay, so I'm going to move it up so I can see some better points. But what I'm looking for is when these y values are the same. So see when the x is -2, the y is 3, that means there's an intersection there. But the other thing is when x is -4, y is -5. So the blue line, okay, so look over here, that blue line, that's the one where I had 11. You can pick 2 of these points or 3 of these points, and you can get the points to plot so that you can connect your dots and make a good line. Or you can do it the way I showed you. But anyways, here's another way to do it with your calculator. Okay, this is the x value, this is the y value. The x is 0, the y value is 8 for the second equation. When x is 0, the y value is 11 for the first equation. So anyways, that's how you can get some points to plot them on your paper. You can get your points from the calculator. All right, last problem, number 10. So I'm going to teach you how to do this on your calculator. So go to my calculator, go to y equals, clear this off, clear this off. I'll teach you how to do it by hand and then the calculator. Inside the parentheses is always backwards. So absolute values make these, okay? This point is given by these two numbers, okay? But this one's always backwards. So a -2 becomes +2, and that's a -3. So positive 2, negative 3, that's that point. This is like the slope, so I go up 1 over 3, up 1 over 3, up 1 over 3 forever and ever. And I do it the same way over here, okay? So up 1 over 3, and I can keep doing that forever. Grab my pen, connect those dots. So there's the V. Okay, again, on your calculator, 1 divided by 3. I do that first. Now to get the absolute value, you hit math, move it over to num, abs, 1/3. So now I come back and I see that it's x minus 2. So I do x minus 2 in here, and then minus 3. Okay, and I can hit graph and it'll show you the picture. But again, to get the points, so to get the points, I hit second graph. And now I can see these points better. So at negative 7, it's 0. Negative 4, it's negative 1. Negative 1, it's 2. So that's the ordered pair. Okay, so like 2, it was at negative 3. 5, it was at negative 2. So I look at this, 2 and negative 3, 5 and negative 2. So those are my points. So now I'm going to do the next one. Y equals negative 1 divided by 3 parentheses x minus 2 squared, x minus 2 squared plus 2. So now I hit second graph because I'm really after these points. So at 2, it's 2. At negative 1, it's negative 1. So okay, let's do this. Whoops. So at 2, it's 2. So at 2, it was 2. Negative 1, it's negative 1. Negative 1, it's negative 1. Negative 4 was negative 10. Now if it's a parabola, it's symmetrical going the other way. So like 5 is going to be negative 1, and then the next one where it crosses is going to be negative 10 as well. Okay, and it's going to be 3 is, so 8's negative 10, 5's negative 1. So come over here to 8, it's negative 10. At 5, it's negative 1. This looks like a parabola. Okay, so that's what it looks like. Looks like it crosses right here and right here. It's going to be tough. Those don't cross exactly on corners, so we're just going to say about what they are. So that's about negative 1.3 for this one, something about there. And it looks like it crosses really close to negative 2. Over here, it looks like it's about 5.3 and about negative 2. So those are my answers. That's the intersection point. That's that point and that point. Okay. You could find them exactly on your calculator. If I go to my graph, once it gets done, so I go a second trace, and it's the calculate menu. I go intersect. So first curve is the blue one. The next curve is the red one. Where do I think they intersect? I'm going to move the little cursor about to right there. I hit enter. It says it's at negative 1.4 and negative 1.86. So negative 1.4, negative 1.86. If you had what I had up here, I'd give you credit. But anyways, that's more exact. So that's how you do that using your calculator.